Good evening. Thanks for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you tonight. The GST Council decides to amend laws that impose a 28% GST on the full value of online gaming, horse racing and casinos. The online gaming industry calls it a killer blow, says it will wipe out companies and lead to job losses. The Tata Group is set to become the first Indian company to manufacture iPhones in India. A Bloomberg report says Tatas are close to buying a factory run by Apple supplier Wistron in Karnataka. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 Tatas have been doing their due diligence for a while. There are some pending issues which are in the process of being resolved. The Supreme Court strikes down the third extension in tenure given to S.K. Mishra, the head of the Enforcement Directorate, terming it illegal. Orders Mishra to relinquish office by the 31st of July. The Apex Court had barred an extension given to Mishra in 2021, but the government had promulgated an ordinance to nullify the order. Defence stocks rally after proposals to buy 26 Rafale jets and 3 Scorpene submarines get the green light. Both deals likely to be announced during Prime Minister Modi's visit to France later this week. IT major TCS set to kick off earnings season tomorrow. A CNBC-TV18 poll predicts dollar revenue growth of 0.5%, the slowest pace of growth excluding the COVID period. HCL Tech is also likely to post tepid growth in what is seasonally a weak quarter. The union government is likely to step in as Go First remains at loggerheads with aircraft lessors. Sources say Corporate Affairs Ministry officials believe it should be easier for lessors to take back the planes when an airline goes into insolvency. Monsoon fury across North India severely impacts lives and livelihoods. Himachal is the worst affected. The Met Department warns of heavy rainfall across several states. Nearly 4 years after the abrogation of Article 370 and the bifurcation of Jammu and Kashmir, the Supreme Court agrees to hear petitions against the decision from the 2nd of August. The court also declares the government's affidavit saying normalcy has returned to Kashmir will not have any bearing in its examination of the constitutionality of the decision. Russia launches missile strikes at Kyiv as NATO leaders gather in Lithuania. Sweden set to become the 32nd member of the military alliance after Turkey drops its opposition. Well, straight to the market action. The Sensex gained over 270 points and the Nifty gained 80 points today, and this despite a sharp fall in bank stocks in the last hour of trade. The Nifty Bank Index has lost over 100 points. On the other hand, mid-caps outperformed the blue chips with the index gaining over 300 points. But the top story tonight, the 50th meeting of the GST Council was held in New Delhi today. The Council has agreed to impose 28% GST on the full value of online gaming. As far as casinos are concerned, what we are given to understand from the CBIC chief that the 28% will apply on the purchase value of the chips. That tax will come into effect on online gaming after amendments are made to the laws. Remember, as of today, online gaming is not part of the GST law, so an amendment will have to be moved to bring online gaming under the GST law. The CBIC chairman, as I pointed out, clarified that the 28% GST will be imposed on the value of chips in casinos. Remember, this has been a thorny issue for months now. The council had set up a group of ministers to find consensus. Industry has called the decision on online gaming with the imposition of 28% a killer blow and said that companies will be wiped out, leading to job losses. Here are reactions to the decision, starting with the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman.
There will be some amendment to the GST law to include online gaming also in it. And simply put, you can, of course, seek clarification when you ask questions. Simply put, online gaming, horse racing, and casinos will be taxed. They will be taxed at 28%, each one, and they will be taxed on full face value.
With regard to casinos, the decision has been that it will be, first of all, the rate of tax, like Honorable FM just clarified, will be 28%, and it will be applicable to the value of the chips that a person who buys, before playing in a casino. So it's the purchase value of the chips on which the tax will apply.
Extremely unfortunate and terrible for the industry. I'd just say two things. First and foremost, it's 28%, and that's high, but also the fact that it's on full value and not on gross giving revenue. Consumers now do not have an opportunity for the amount of money that they play with. they will get far less in return, and for a game of skill as well. Secondly, almost $4 billion of, for FDI was supposed to come into this industry. Now looking at this, it's this completely retrograde step. You can see that capital is very unlikely to come into India. The startups in this sector will not be able to survive.
This would not benefit anybody. The entire industry, would get wiped out. The thing is also that the only ones to benefit from this would be the illegal offshore, gambling companies and their offerings. And that is something that we at the AHF have been fighting for the last 7-8 years. But those are the guys who would benefit because, none of them pay any taxes here. But here, the Indian-bred SME and, startup communities and companies that have, come to the fore over the last 10 to 12 years, they would be completely wiped out. And, millions of job losses as well.
Well, that is the reaction coming in from the online gaming industry, clearly disappointed, saying that this is going to be curtains for many of the startups in the sector. 900 online gaming companies operating, and what we saw being announced by MeitY, which was really self-regulatory mechanism, that was being seen as a big forward movement by the industry, hoping that this would finally put to rest the uncertainty. But with the 28% imposition of the GST, that too on full value, industry is saying that this is going to be a struggle to survive. Now, the other big story this evening, the Tata Group is set to become the first Indian company to manufacture iPhones in India. According to a Bloomberg report, the conglomerate is in talks with Apple to acquire their supplier Wistron's factory in Karnataka. The deal is expected to be closed by August. It will be the first time that an Indian company will assemble iPhones in India. CNBC-TV18 has independently verified that the Tatas have been carrying out their due diligence for a while now. Sources have also told us that there are some issues that continue to be ironed out, and it is work in progress. The potential value of the deal is likely to be more than $600 million. Wistron has been in India for the last 15 years. The Taiwanese company set up its Indian subsidiary in 2008. It employs more than 12,000 people here. Now, the Supreme Court has struck down the third extension in tenure given to S.K. Mishra, the head of the Enforcement Directorate. The Supreme Court has termed it as illegal and has ordered Mishra to relinquish office by the 31st of July. Remember, the Apex Court had struck down an extension given to Mishra in 2021, but the government had promulgated an ordinance to nullify the order. Ashmit joins us now with the details of what the Supreme Court has said and what this now means. Ashmit.
Well, the Supreme Court clearly has said that while the centre does indeed have the power to go ahead and to grant such extensions for a 5-year term, it has held that as far as this specific case is concerned of S.K. Mishra, it is invalid in law, and towards that end had asked S.K. Mishra to demit office by July 31st. The rationale of the Apex Court being that India will be undergoing an evaluation by the FATF, and so to ensure that there's a smooth transition of power, the Supreme Court has granted that small leeway of allowing S.K. Mishra to end his term on July 31st. Now, here's the background to it of it all. S.K. Mishra was appointed in 2018 for a 2-year term. Subsequently, 3 times, 2020, 2021 and 2022, government had granted him a 1-year extension. This was the 3rd extension that he's currently operating on. In the midst of it all, in 2021, the Supreme Court had held that S.K. Mishra cannot be allowed any further extensions. That, in turn, had been nullified by an ordinance, and therefore we had this litigation before the Apex Court. So on the question of the ordinance and the power and the changes that were made to the law, well, the Supreme Court said that that's kosher, that's good, that's fine. The centre does indeed have the power to grant this extension, but with respect to S.K. Mishra, the Supreme Court noted that any such move that will nullify the Apex Court order, that will nullify the mandamus that was granted by the Apex Court when it had explicitly said that this S.K. Mishra cannot be allowed to continue as the ED director, that cannot be permitted, that is not good in law, and that is invalid in law. So the Apex Court asking for S.K. Mishra to demit office July 31st should be his last date in the office.
I don't think the Supreme Court will grant relief because he has taken certain action based on a law which was passed by the ordinance. Now that law has been struck down, that cannot have any retrospective effect. Secondly, the Supreme Court itself has permitted him to continue until 31st of July. And I don't think the Supreme Court will ever challenge an action which has already been taken, because that would create chaos.
HP Ranina, their reactions coming into the Supreme Court's order. More news from the Supreme Court. The Apex Court has deferred hearing the Adani Hindenburg matter to August. The court has said SEBI should conclude the investigation by the 15th of August. SEBI lawyers said the investigation is underway with all available resources. The hearing now to take place in August. Shares of Vedanta shed close to 2% today after Foxconn withdrew from its $19.5 billion semiconductor joint venture with the company. Both companies maintain that they remain committed to India. Vedanta said it has lined up other partners but did not disclose any names. In a statement, Foxconn said that its withdrawal is not a negative and that it remains committed to India. Foxconn says it will submit an application under the government's Semicon scheme. The Adani Group is planning to bid for Anil Ambani's coal-fired power plants that are currently being auctioned by the bankruptcy court. A report by Bloomberg suggests that Anil Ambani's Reliance Power is also considering making an offer for the asset in an attempt to win back control of the firm. Defence stocks on fire today after the Defence Procurement Board approved a proposal to purchase 26 Rafale fighter jets for the Indian Navy. The deal could be announced during Prime Minister Modi's visit to France later this week. Parikshit standing by. With more, Parikshit, what else can we expect?
Well, we're hearing that there could be 5 to 6 big-ticket defence deals that could be on the anvil. There will be a crucial deal on co-development of jet engines for India's fighter jet program. That will be between Safran of France and DRDO in India. Another deal could be on development of helicopter engines as well. That will be important. Then Mazgaon Dock, of course, has been in focus. One, because of the US Navy's agreement with Mazgaon Dock Limited to repair Navy ships here in India. And now, because the Defence Procurement Board has approved the acquisition, the initial approval for acquisition of 3 Scorpene submarines and manufacturing of them at Mazgaon Dock Limited. So that will be important going forward. We're also hearing that the Defence Procurement Board has given the initial nod to the acquisition of 26 fighter jets for the Indian Navy. These will be Rafale marine aircraft, 22 fighter jets, 4 trainers. But the final approval for this will come at the Defence Acquisition Council meeting that will be held on the 13th of July. The Prime Minister is visiting France on 13th and 14th, and that is where there will be an agreement at the highest political level, and that's where the deal actually has to be signed. So let's see how things progress, but it seems that France is very keen for us to sign on the deal, and we seem to be moving in that direction as well. But a final call will be taken on the 13th of July at the DAC meeting.
Will enable Mazgaon Docks to retain the skill sets that it has so carefully nurtured since the Scorpene program began. About yards which have not got the Scorpene order, the PSUs, they too will be able to now harness their skill sets, their capabilities towards the very large number of surface platforms that are also being built towards developing the kind of Navy that India requires. So I think it's a win-win situation across the board.
Well, expectation that those deals will be announced when the Prime Minister visits France. Now, IT giant TCS and HCL Tech will kickstart the first quarter earnings for this fiscal, and it looks to be a tepid quarter for the sector, with multiple headwinds expected to take a toll on the top line. Rima standing by with more. Rima, what's in store for IT companies this earnings season?
Q1 FY24 is expected to be weak despite the strong seasonality which typically takes place in the June quarter. What's hurting? Uncertain macros have led to a cut in discretionary spending. Projects are getting deferred. Some of them are going to get cancelled. And this is likely to result in a revenue decline for Wipro and Tech Mahindra. We're expecting a flat revenue growth for both TCS and HCL Tech, while Infosys could clock in a constant currency revenue growth of 0.7% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. And just to put it in context, typically the June quarter is very strong, and last year all these companies grew between 2 to 5% last year. Moving on to margins. Now, margins are likely to remain depressed despite the easing supply side challenges, and that's on account of weak operating leverage. Margins for margins for Tech Mahindra and TCS are likely to show a sharp decline. That's on account of wage hike. But for the others, it's expected to remain on the flatter side. The silver lining in the quarter is going to be the strong deal wins and the order pipeline. Most companies, in fact, have announced very large deal wins. For TCS, for instance, there was this $1.8 billion BSNL deal. There was a Standard Life deal. There was Marks and Spencer's deal. Infosys, if you remember, had announced a very large, nearly $500 million deal with a Nordic bank called Danske. And even the others, if you go down the chain, mid-cap IT companies have all reported pretty good order wins, and that's because cost optimization projects have been on the rise. Now let's talk about the guidance for FY24. Now analysts expect both Infi and TCS to largely maintain the guidance, though for Infosys, the guidance at the upper end may come down. Earlier, it was 4 to 7%. It will come down to 4 to 6%, while HCL Tech's revenue guidance will be maintained, and both these companies are likely to hold on to their margin guidance. All eyes will also be on the new CEO at TCS, K. Krithivasan, as he took over the company from 1st of June. On Infosys, there have been a spate of exits over the last couple of months, which has got the markets a bit worried.
Rima, many thanks for joining us. Software giant Microsoft announcing that it is looking to reduce its workforce, citing organizational adjustment as the reasons. Reports also suggest the company has laid off 276 employees from its Washington division. These layoffs are separate from the 10,000 job cuts that Microsoft had announced in January of this year. Up next, the government is set to firm up its view on the tussle between aircraft lessors and airlines. We take a look at some of the Indian airlines facing turbulence. Back in 2. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs is looking into issues raised by aircraft lessors in the cases of Go First and SpiceJet. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 the ministry has reached out to the Aviation Ministry over the ongoing insolvency proceedings in the sector. Sources add that the MCA is of the view that it should be easier for lessors to repossess their aircraft once an airline goes into insolvency. While Air India and Indigo are increasing their capacity and expanding their network, other players, including Go First and SpiceJet, are struggling. Add to that, the revival of Jet Airways looks almost uncertain and unlikely. Madiha joins us now with more on the turbulence in Indian skies. Madiha.
Well, turbulent times indeed for Indian aviation players. As of now, only 3 airlines, which is Air India combined, Indigo and Akasa Air, are flying smoothly. 2 airlines, including SpiceJet and Go First, are staring at an uncertain future, and Jet Airways' relaunch remains a non-starter. Let me start with what's happening at SpiceJet. The airline posted losses after losses for the last few years. From 900 crores in FY20, its losses climbed to 1700 crores in FY22. And to make matters worse, the Supreme Court has ordered the airline to pay 380 crores to Kalanidhi Maran as interest on the 2018 arbitral award. But that's not the only headache for SpiceJet. Less liquidity led to delayed payments to vendors, and now 3 lessors have moved the National Company Law Tribunal seeking recovery of dues. Important to remember that majority of SpiceJet's fleet is leased, so non-payment to lessors may result in lessors taking back their planes. As of now, according to a fleet tracking site, the airline has 30 of the 61 planes on ground. This means half of its fleet is not operational. When you're not flying enough planes, you're not generating enough money to run operations. A lot is reflected in the airline's domestic market share, that half from 10% in May 2022 to 5.4% in May this year. Let's shift focus to Go First. The airline is grounded since early May, and of the 54 planes, only 26 are in a ready-to-fly condition. The aviation regulator has conducted an audit of the airline's facilities but is yet to wave a green flag for its relaunch. The process is more complicated than it looks. Lessors say Go First doesn't have valid leases to fly their aircraft, so fleet availability is a big question here. Then Pratt & Whitney, the engine supplier, hasn't shared any specific timeline to deliver the engines. Now let's look at Jet Airways, which is unlikely to return to the skies. Lenders for the first time have sought liquidation of the airline. That's because the Jalan-Calroc consortium hasn't paid any money to creditors or workmen so far. The resolution plan was passed in June 2021. The airline doesn't even have the air operator's certificate now. So as I mentioned in the start, India currently has only 3 airlines, Air India combined, Indigo and Akasa Air, that are flying without any major hurdles.
All right, Madiha, many thanks for joining us. That is the latest as far as the current situation in our skies is concerned. And sticking with aviation, Air India has announced new flights from the new airport in Goa to London's Gatwick Airport. This makes the airline the first to fly international from the Mopa Airport. The 3 weekly flights to UK will begin from the 21st of July. Monsoon fury across North India continues to disrupt lives and livelihoods. The Met has predicted heavy rainfall in many states over the next 24 hours. Himachal has been the worst affected state. 72 people have been killed in the state alone in the last 2 weeks. The situation in Uttarakhand, Punjab and Haryana is grim as well. Our team of reporters bring us ground reports from the rain-battered states.
मूसलाधार बारिश ने पूरे उत्तर भारत को अपनी चपेट में ले लिया है। हिमाचल प्रदेश हो, उत्तराखंड हो, दिल्ली के तमाम जो इलाके हैं वो इस वक्त पानी में डूबे हुए नजर आ रहे हैं। और इस वक्त हम मौजूद हैं हिमाचल प्रदेश में छोटी काशी कहे जाने वाले मंडी जिले में, जहां पर मेरे ठीक पीछे ये बहने वाली व्यास नदी कल अपने उफान पर थी। और उसकी बड़ी वजह ये थी कि पंडोह डैम के भर जाने की वजह से 4 गेटों को खोल दिया गया था, जिसके बाद ये जो व्यास नदी है प्रचंड वेग के साथ उफान लिए हुए आगे बढ़ती चली गई। और उसके बाद ये बढ़ते बढ़ते पानी यहाँ ऊंचाई तक आ गया था। और वो जो छत आप देख रहे हैं, ये पहली छत, वो पूरी तरीके से डूब चुका था। और ये पानी अगर वहां देखें तो रिहायशी इलाकों में भर गया था और वहां एसडीआरएफ और एनडीआरएफ को तैनात किया गया था। रास्ता पूरी तरीके से ब्लॉक कर दिया गया था।
There are areas where water has entered in the household, and in fact I'm standing in one such house where water has in fact entered, and you can see in the visuals, in fact, these people have been asked to vacate the area, but they are saying that they are living here since years, and now it is very difficult to shift the all items and the essential needs. पानी कब आया आपके?
पानी जी कल से मतलब सुबह से स्टार्ट हो गया आना 10 बजे से. हाँ. बढ़ गया मतलब धीरे-धीरे एकदम से तेज से बढ़ा, अब भी बढ़ रहा, तो अब धीरे-धीरे बढ़ा बिल्कुल.
We are currently present inside the Pragati Maidan tunnel, which is now closed for 4 days, and the efforts are currently being made to remove the water at the earliest. At the same time, you can see that this is the place which is completely filled with water, and this is also one such reason as to why no commuter is allowed to enter or pass through this tunnel.
Behind me is the Chhat Puja Ghat in Delhi, located on the banks of the Yamuna River. We can see parts of the ghat which already have been submerged in water. Not just Delhi, but several other parts of North India are expected to experience heavy rainfall. A flood alert has already been declared by the Delhi government, and people living on the embankments and floodplains of the Yamuna River have been asked to shift to safer places.
Well, trying times across North India. 5-judge Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court will start hearing petitions challenging the abrogation of Article 370 from the 2nd of August. Remember, the centre's move in August 2019, close to 4 years ago, had stripped Jammu and Kashmir of its special status. The apex court has said the bench will hear the case on a regular day-to-day basis, except Mondays and Fridays. The court has also said the centre's latest affidavit shall not be relied upon to argue on the aspect of constitutionality. In international news, the NATO summit is kicked off in Lithuania with an agenda to tackle the war in Ukraine and decide on Ukraine's bid for membership, but no decision has been taken yet. Ukraine's President Zelensky hit out at NATO leaders. He said it would be absurd if Ukraine is not offered a time frame for NATO membership, but NATO is set to expand. Sweden likely to join the military alliance, making it an organization with 32 countries. This after Turkey dropped its objection. Just hours before the meet, Russia launched airstrikes overnight on Kyiv. The second time this month, Ukraine said it shot all of them down. Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned. The news continues here on CNBC-TV18. We'll be back in a minute with more.